Good afternoon from the Authors Guild Foundation. Welcome to today's Money Matters Talk. Yes, you can budget as a writer. Last time we heard about our strategies for determining and negotiating a fair rate for your freelance work, so today's budgeting talk is a great next step. For those new here, the Authors Guild Foundation is the charitable arm of the Authors Guild. The foundation advocates for and supports writers throughout the U.S. with programs like this, which are always free thanks to the support of our donors. The Authors Guild is a membership organization, so if you join, your dues come with otherwise free access to our legal help services and so much more. You can learn more about the Guild and the Foundation at authorsguild.org. Thanks to the audience for sending in your questions. It really helps our guest speakers, Erin Lowry and Uchechi Kalu, know what you want to hear about. They've got a great talk planned, and we'll have Q&A time at the end. Feel free to enter additional questions in the Q&A box here in Zoom at any time. Uchechi Kalu is a certified financial planner and a poet. She was a 2024 Paris Olympics Poetry Fellow. I love that biographical detail. She's received work from support for her work from PEN America, and this is her third time doing an event with us. Thank you for being back here, Uchechi. And Erin Lowry is the host of our Money Matters series, the author of the Broke Millennial series of books. She's been featured widely in print and online and TV, and she's a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. With that, Erin, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Hi, everyone. Wonderful to have you here, have you back. And we're really excited to dig into today's conversation. But before we get into the nitty gritty when it comes to how to budget as a writer, we just want to make one thing really clear. And that is this concept that money isn't just about math. Unfortunately, I think all too often, especially as writers, we think that, oh, well, I'm not good at money because I'm not good at math. I am a words person. I am somebody who is in the arts. Math is not something that I was ever good at doing in school. Therefore, I'm not great with money. This is a mentality we really need to get over, in large part because so much of money, especially personal finance, and what we're going to be talking about today, is more psychology than it is math. Yes, do you know need to know some basic calculations? Sure. Are they all Googleable and you can use your calculator? Absolutely. You do not need to know a lot of math and or complicated formulas and equations in order to have a true mastery and understanding and control over your personal financial situation. And the other thing I want to really make sure we dig into, and I'll have Uchechi speak to this as well, is we saw a comment come in that I think is really important to address up top. And it's this idea of, I hope you'll keep in mind that some of us have incomes of $50,000 and below to start with. And the reason we really want to acknowledge this up top is because what we're discussing today is not about, oh, you need to earn X amount of money in order to live a comfortable life, which can be true, especially depending on your circumstances and location and family size and all of that. But really, the bigger conversation today is that a budget at its base is just something that gives you control over your money. And you can learn how to be in control over your finances at a budget at various income levels. You do not need to have a lot of money in order to be in control over your personal finances. So, before we move on to the 3 steps to build a budget that works, especially with variable and irregular income, I do want to kick it over to Achechi to also follow up on that idea.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. And really, really good to see everyone here. I want to add to this is that what we're talking about today, as Erin mentioned, are principles that you can apply at any point in your financial life. And our income is going to fluctuate throughout our lives. So it's one thing that whether you're a salaried person right now, probably at some point you're not going to be a salaried person. You might retire, you might be getting this, you might be getting that as you're leaving the workforce. So the principles that we're learning now are so applicable over the lifetime of our lives. And I would say more so, even from my own experience as a certified financial planner, that it's even better to think about how to manage your money when you don't have that much of it. Because as it grows, lifestyle creep will grow. And I've talked to many clients who are earning way more than many of us can even imagine, especially I live in LA. A lot of people are working in the entertainment industry and are getting huge sums of money all at once, and then they're broke within a few years. So I want you to know that it's really not just about your income. It really is about how you manage these principles and how you really implement them in your life. And that's what we're going to step into today.
All right. So, one of the first big things that we want to talk about today is getting organized. And a big piece of that for all of us, separating business and personal finances. So, Uchechi, do you want to get started on that?
Yeah, so let's just talk about why. I was literally having this conversation with someone this week who is like in a service industry. And so they're constantly getting money into their account, just like on a day by day basis, on an hour by hour basis. And so they kind of felt like, why should I just separate it? It's just me. I'm not that complicated. But here's why. It's like one of the biggest blockages I see about getting clear about your money is one, actually knowing how much you're making first of all. And then countering that against and calculating that against how much you're spending in your business and spending in your personal life. I've talked to so many clients who were like, oh my gosh, tax season came, and like I didn't even know what to do because I was getting money into my account. I was paying it out into life expenses, and I just wasn't thinking about what my business needed versus what my life needed, and could I even afford taxes, right? So most people don't really know how much they make, to be honest with you. We'd be quite surprised if you asked like 10 people in a room what they made. Most people don't know, okay? But it's really hard to take steps if your accounts are commingled. So number one, just separate it. And like if you are at a stage where you're like, okay, I do not want to legally incorporate my business. I'm just going to be a sole prop. That's fine with me. Then you don't need to do that. But what you can do is have a separate bank account in your checking account or in your savings account that is just your business checking or just your business saving. But if you are an incorporated business, if you do have an LLC, then you do actually legally need to separate your business bank account from your checking. Although you might feel like no one's checking for you, eventually it might come to pass that you're audited or something like that, and that can be a really big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. For S corporations, LLCs, it is really important. S corporations, particularly, also are required to run a salary, run a payroll, even if you are a party of one. So, you're then required to separate, which in many ways makes life a little bit easier. But in those early years, when you aren't required to, it's pretty easy to just let it all go into one account and try to figure it out. One of my favorite systems to set things up, and I just want to remind everybody, for those who have tuned in many times, you might remember we did a whole webinar dedicated to paying yourself a salary on a variable income. It walks through the nitty gritty of how to set this up. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on it now today, because you can go to the resource library of the Authors Guild and check that out. We will also send you a link in the follow-up email. But the very, very simple way to do this is twofold. One, you're not incorporated, you are not an LLC, you are not an S corporation. It's just you. Yeah, set up that checking account and that savings account that is separate from your personal. Even if they're marked by the bank as personal accounts, just set one up. You can nickname a lot of accounts. So you
Yeah.
can call it business checking account, and you can call your personal one personal checking account. And then your savings account, I recommend maybe calling it Uncle Sam's money. And then every time you get paid, I personally like to set aside 40% of every paycheck, because I earmark that not only for city, state, federal, that self-employment income tax, any other unexpected taxations or fees, but then any remainder can also be set aside into a retirement vehicle for you as well. So putting aside 40% might feel huge, but it does make sure that you have a really healthy buffer for taxes, for the unexpected fees and taxes, and then hopefully also for retirement. And if you want to get more aggressive, you can push it higher and higher. So making sure we do have that separation of church and state when it comes to your finances. And same can come to credit cards. If you are not eligible to get a business credit card, just get a credit card that in your mind, maybe you even write on it with a little post-it, a sticky note, what have you, business credit card, and you use that for all things business. So also come tax time, it's really easy for you to see where all of those expenses were, because they were all on this one credit card or coming out of this one particular account. So we create that organization and that separation. I also want to point out we're going to stop after each section today to answer questions, as well as answer questions at the end, just to make sure we're in real time answering. So if you have something that's percolating, please do not hesitate to drop it into the Q&A box so we can answer it now, and we can also follow up at the end.
Can this is actually, I wanted to add something that just came to mind, and it's kind of tied to a question that just came through, which asks, do you recommend that freelance writers incorporate as an LLC? Um, So here's something to know about why it can be very useful to incorporate as an LLC, and then also why you might want to have a business account from a budgeting perspective. Okay. So what an LLC is, it's right, it's a limited liability corporation. What that means is that if you were, I don't know, writing some salacious article about someone and they decide to sue you, okay? But you've only been, getting paid into the LLC, not your personal business accounts. Things aren't commingled. Then the person can only sue you for the assets that are inside the company, right? When you start commingling your business funds with your personal funds, then it can be a lot easier for someone to actually sue you for like everything that you own, right? So another reason why incorporating can be so important, if you are in a line of work where you feel like someone might come after you, where there might be some actual liability, then that could be a good reason to incorporate. But especially then is a really good reason to as Erin was saying, to separate church and state, so that your personal assets, maybe you own a home or you have retirement or you have an inheritance, things like that, um, couldn't be affected, right? And couldn't really come into play. Now, in terms of as a freelance writer, I think there's probably different scales to why you would or would not want to incorporate. Like if you were doing this um, kind of part-time, you could just be a sole proprietor and still, make sure that your expenses have been clearly delineated so that you can use those to reduce your taxes. If you're finding that this is like really your full-time work, and there could be some more liability involved, then an LLC might be a really good idea. If you are like, actually, I'm earning just as much with this as I might earn like at a corporate job or something. By then, and it's usually around $100,000 or more per year, incorporating as a C Corp, or rather filing as a C Corp, it's not really called incorporating. Filing as a C Corp becomes more, it just tends to be a much more financially smart decision as long as you're able to maintain that amount of income over a very, very long period of time. Because if your income slips, usually under that $100,000 mark or so, it becomes a little bit more expensive. So that's how I answer that question. Do you want to take the next one, Erin?
Yep. And I'll also point out we have done a webinar before about LLC or S corporation should you form an entity. And it's great information about does one, both, either make sense, and getting to the point too of sometimes it is for legal protection, sometimes it makes sense mathematically for taxes. It's a great webinar to go and check out. In terms of if your business funds are running low and you have to loan the business money from your personal finances, how do you handle the separation of church and state? I'd kind of think about this twofold. One, speaking to either a CPA or an attorney to help you for actually structuring how to loan your business money. You could actually have legal paperwork set up that makes it clear that you are loaning your business money, and having that kind of all be above board, particularly if there was ever an audit that happened. But the other thing to consider, if you are structured, let's say, as an S corporation and you are on payroll, you could technically turn off your payroll for a period of time and try to live off of your personal assets as opposed to continuing to pay yourself from the business account. That gets a little technical in terms of for how long are you still paying yourself a reasonable salary in the eyes of the IRS when it comes tax time. But if your business income has gone down to such a degree that you're worried about running out of runway, you've probably paid yourself a reasonable salary for that year. So I would
Yeah.
be less concerned about that. And you could then just kind of toggle back and forth between if you're living off of your personal expenses or your business income in this very niche particular situation. The other reason I really want to emphasize, we keep saying paying yourself a salary. The reason this is so important is because it's going to help regulate the rest of your personal financial life. When you have this separation that we keep harping on about, when you know that this is the money that you have made from your business, this is the assets you have over here, this amount has been set aside for paying taxes and all of your other business related expenses. So this is the chunk that I now have to pay myself, my personal self, every month. having a salary that you have determined based on how much you're earning and what you need really is going to then help you set an actual budget. So it's not, hey, this was a great month. I made a ton of money. I can live large. 3 months later, I haven't made a bunch of money. I just have to go into deprivation mode. It really does help smooth out that plane a lot and then allows you to also have information to make plans.
Yeah. And I think that leads really well into the second step of really building a budget that works. So we've talked about now your income and expenses from your personal and business are totally separate. We know how much your life costs a lot more clearly. Um, and so let's talk now about how to create a spending plan and pay yourself a salary. And we're going to look at two different budgeting methods. One from the perspective of someone who has irregular income, which a lot of people on this call might have, even for me as a business owner, Erin as a business owner, even the Authors Guild, it's in, right? It's an institution. They're getting money sometimes. It's going out, right? A lot of us are actually dealing with irregular income. So it's more common that you might think, even if you're feeling like, oh my God, am I the only one like this? Okay. And then we're going to talk about ones for freelancers or just for folks that have regular income, right? You might have a 9 to 5 job, you might be in a corporation. So for irregular income, what I usually recommend is a forward-looking budget. And how is that different from, if you're getting a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th? So a forward-looking budget means that the money that I receive this month from work, I will use next month. I use it to project what will happen later, not necessarily what will happen now. And why I think this can be even more important, especially if in your business people are Venmoing you, they're Zelling you, like you're getting a cash app here, cash app there, and it's just landing in your account. What I see happens for those kind of professionals is that they're like, okay, I got 5K this month. Suddenly I have 5K of expenses. I got 2K this month. Oh, now I just have 2K of expenses, right? And what that tells me as a certified financial planner is that actually probably your baseline expenses are much lower than you might even know. And you're just spending as you get more, right? So it's just really easy to overspend when you have high income months. And then when you're not making enough, you just start stressing, even if you don't know that you might have even had enough to truly live. Okay. Um, why this is also really important is that it helps the money accumulate when you have those really, really great months, and then you have a nice reserve. And so, for example, again, I live in Los Angeles. When I'm working with a client who is working in Hollywood, it is an industry of feast and famine, right? So if you're making 100K per episode, which is like crazy, but it's a real thing, right? And you know you're going to be on 8 episodes, but you also know that on average it takes you 3 to 4 years to get like a solid gig, then we're not thinking of this year as being like an $800,000 a year. We're gonna be thinking, how do we live off of 150 and then like save another 650 and build that and grow that for the famine, right? That might just be built into the work that you do naturally. Okay. Um, Now I just want to say that this forward-looking budget method, it's not 100% foolproof. Okay. Because if you do go through a sustained downturn, you might just be low on funds, right? So at the end of the day, and this might go back to the person who was talking about only earning 50K a year, things that can help is making more money. I mean, that's just the honest truth, right? But as we've been talking about, we want to incorporate the principles even as we make more money, okay? So in this forward-looking budget, there are three elements. Now that you know how much your life really costs, I want you to break it down into three types: a good budget, a better budget, a best budget. And before even getting into the nitty-gritty, you can probably already imagine like, oh, I had a good month. Okay. Right? You're like, okay, I got a good month. I'm paying all my bills. What's up? Right? I had a better than average month. That's really nice. And then times when you're like, I'm having the best month of my life, right? And so even in that, energetically, you can feel that you're probably in a good, better, best budget, going to go from a place of I'm covering everything. Better is like I'm covering everything plus. Best, I'm covering everything that I could even want, okay? So your good budget is going to cover your basic expenses, your savings goals, and your debt repayment, right? And so what you're seeing is that at the core, even a very good month, I want you to be saving and I want you to be paying off your debt. That's not for the best month. That's for the good month. So if you need to increase your income to get to a good stage, at least let's aim for that. Okay. And a better budget, like in a better month, we're looking for covering your basic expenses, your savings goals, your debt, and then increasing your discretionary spending. Go out on the town, spend some money on your girls, your boys, whomever, your kids, yourself, right? Enjoy it. And the best month, it's all of those things, but I want you to increase your savings goals, increase your debt payment if they're still there, and also increase your discretionary spending. All right. So it kind of really, really, really builds on itself. How about regular? How about a more regular budget? What do you think, Erin?
Before I get into that, one thing that I want to tag on this, it's so important to know how much you need. You know, these budgets are so important. The difference between the good, better, best, but we can't do any of them without a true comprehensive understanding of this is all of my expenses in the month. And one of the things that I would really challenge people to do, and this dovetails really into the budget style I'm about to talk about, is to take time. It could take an hour, might take you 15 minutes, probably closer to an hour. Just budget the time at some point, maybe in 15-minute increments, to open up, whether you want to write it in a notebook, open up an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc or what have you, and write down every single little expense that you have. Those also need to include annual expenses, which we'll get to in this next budgeting style. But write all of those down so you really fully know between your debt obligations, your monthly payments on things like whether it's a car note, a mortgage, or your rent, or your phone bill, cable, all those streaming services, gym membership, co-working space, and every little nitty-gritty thing that comes in that we might forget about. It's important to have all of that written out so you have the information, because none of these can be acted upon without all of the information in your hand. And the reason that's critical is going into this idea of a zero sum or zero based budget. So, this is great for people who, to some degree, even if you have variable income, it can be great. But if you've stabilized that variable income by paying yourself a salary, that's where this is really, really helpful. Because the whole takeaway of a zero based budget is that every single dollar that you earn is accounted for every single month. The other way that people talk about this is give your dollars a job. So there's a software called You Need a Budget that really has popularized this model, but this is also something that you can do all by yourself. It's what I do every single month. It's just me and my little spreadsheet that goes through and does a zero-based budgeting system. And this concept of assigning all of your dollars a job is that at the start of the month, let's say that you know that your salary is going to be $4,000. That's how much that you have coming in. Then you decide every single one of those dollars, where are they going? And that includes all the bills you have to pay, your debt obligations, in addition to paying yourself, AKA saving. So putting money into savings, which could be your emergency savings fund, could be that fund for the trip that you want to take, could be that fund for saving up for classes that you're planning to pay for. And then also, let's not forget about retirement. So putting aside money for all of these things. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of good, better, best around all of this. I agree we need to save regardless of our situation. But certain things like, I don't know, that trip you really want to take, that saving might get put on hold for a period of time while we work on rebuilding our emergency savings, or while we work on putting money towards education we need to further our career, et cetera, et cetera. But making sure that you write down where every single dollar is going so that you know how to spend all of your money. And the really advanced level of this budgeting system is kind of the same as the forward thinking budget, where you are using essentially last month's income to pay for this month's expenses. So you're not worried about scrambling and catching up. The money that's coming in is moving forward as opposed to looking back and trying to scramble. I know this sounds like a very tedious budgeting system, and I will say there is a ton of information on the internet about how zero-based budgeting works. So I don't want to get into the full nitty-gritty of here's what software looks like, here's how to overview it. The whole point is you know how much is coming in, and you make sure that all of your money is going exactly where you want it, and that there should be no surprises in the month. Now, obviously, life happens sometimes, and that's also why we have things like emergency savings funds. But more to the point of at the end of the month, it shouldn't be like, oh, I magically have $200 left in my checking account. I'm not sure how that happened, because that money already should have been gone to debt payments or to your savings account. Or maybe this month was good and you did increase your discretionary spend a little bit and you got to do some fun things for yourself. But the idea about handling annual expenses or irregular purchases. Obviously, we don't know how much we're spending on gas every month. We don't know how much we're spending on groceries every month, especially with the cost of groceries continuing to kind of go bananas. What you can do is go back, especially if you charge things on credit cards or a debit card, look at how much you've spent over the last, I'm going to say 3 months, and just average it out. How much do you tend to spend in a month on those things? And then you can set aside that chunk of money for groceries or for transportation or other expenses. The other one is make sure that you analyze your annual expenses that come in, whether that is maybe your homeowner's insurance, your renter's insurance, maybe your car insurance gets paid every 6 months or annually. Other ones could be that annual membership that you pay. Look at all of those memberships and all of those annual expenses, divide them by 12, and make sure you're putting that sum of money aside every single month so that you always have a little nest egg for annual expenses. So those things can't come in and surprise you and throw you off your budget. Everybody can do this differently. Me personally, I actually have a checking account that is just called bills, that I put that sum of money aside every single month so that I know I always have this little reserve over here for when I have to pay those kind of unexpected, quote unquote. Obviously, they're expected, but I might not always remember that it's September when I have to pay my homeowner's insurance. And you don't want to get surprised by a big chunk of money being owed to someone.
Yeah, and I had one more thing about, Aaron mentioned that, this can feel so like tedious. Why am I doing this? Here's something I've found and I've seen with clients when I ask them to actually go through their spending and itemize it, is that a big part of this process, as Aaron already mentioned, it's psychological. You're going to find things and be like, wow, first of all, didn't know I was spending on that. Second of all, and more importantly, does my spending actually align with my values? What is it saying about my life? Sometimes you go back and you're like, oh my God, that period I was just very depressed and I was just like door dashing everything, right? It can also be a story of your life. Or looking and you're like, oh wow, this amount of money is going to like one brother who's always asking me for money. I might need to put up a boundary, right? So very often our spending it's not just the nuts and bolts and numbers as we've been talking about, but as you look at it, you might be able to learn something about your life, learn something about the conditions that you're living in. And then as you start to adjust those things, which are pretty peripheral, right? Or probably human relationship things or things in relation to yourself, it automatically trickles down to your money, right? So we're going to open it up for questions, and there are quite a few that have come through. The first one I'll take since it's asking me, which is just about like QuickBooks and whether I think it's really needed. I do think that some softwares can be very useful. It looks like you're someone who is trying to do, as you said, do it all with invoicing, expense tracking, and getting everything together with an accountant. Personally, I find QuickBooks to be rather overwhelming when I look at it. I am also an artist who works in numbers, but I'm primarily an artist. So sometimes when things get a little bit too spreadsheety, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. So I use another one that I also is like much less expensive than QuickBooks called Zip Books. I think they all now have the same name. It's like $15 a month. And it does everything I need it to do. I personally don't use invoices, but it has that option. I'm not sponsored by them. These guys don't know me. What I would suggest is at least getting a bookkeeper to set up your books. Because that is the part, it's not really, as you go into it, it's not as simple as just being like, this is an expense, this is that. I don't know what your business looks like, but everyone tends to have like at least one or two complications that are unique to their business. So, getting a software, getting someone else to set it up for you, help you understand it, and then you can take it from there. They usually always have a report that will print out and give to your CPA or accountant or whomever it is that you're working with. Um, I can take the next one. Do you want to take it, Aaron?
You can go ahead.
All right. Someone said, just how separate, sorry, do the personal and business accounts need to be? You have them at your same bank. They're under the same member number, but the account numbers are different. Yeah, if you're finding that that works for you and you definitely know that X account is for my personal expenses, X account is for my business expenses, then I think you're probably in good shape. I would say that if your business is incorporated, I would love for you to get an actual business account. But if it's not, and just keeping it separate, but in one place is just easy for you to handle, keep it. Okay. The next person says, YNAB was really overwhelming for me. Got it. In particular, the way the savings accounts were worked into it. Also, I just won't track it every day. Any suggestions for simplifying? Okay. Um, oh, okay. Sorry, I have to return to your previous question. If it is with regard to getting sued, then yes, you should separate it and have a business account. Um, yeah, because
The
from
YNAB one too,
sorry.
if you want to finish getting the sued question, and then I'll take YNAB.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because yeah, from the eyes of the state, it's just a personal um it seems to me to be like this is just a personal account that has another account that you are designating as business. But if that is a bank that says this is a business account, then you should be fine. But if it's two personal accounts with just a different name, then yes, you should separate them. All
You'd
right.
also be surprised how it's not always as complicated as you might think to get a business checking account with a bank. So, again, this is not an endorsement, just saying a bank that people know. So, like Chase Bank has Chase for Business, that like business accounts are a whole arm of their bank. Not all banks have business specific accounts. So, if you go to one of the bigger banks that likely do have business accounts, you might not need to have an S corporation. Likely, if you've set up a pretty simple LLC, you likely will be able to open a business checking account. So, if you're somebody who has set that up in terms of liability and protection, you could also likely go to the bank and set that up for yourself. You're just going to need some basic information. You can call up the bank and ask what they require, whether you need an EIN as opposed to a social security number only. You probably need some level of articles of incorporation like LLC paperwork. But if you're already doing that from a liability standpoint for your business, might as well just take it the next step and actually properly set up the business bank account. So, looking around, whether you want to use a credit union or a major bank, just somebody who has a specific business account. And then it does make that separation much cleaner and more clear in the case of any sort of negative interaction with another party, maybe is how we'll word that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I love
When it
that.
comes to YNAB being overwhelming for someone, I get it. Some of this, I think budgeting software in some cases can be too much, too
Yeah.
overwhelming. I completely understand and hear you. I personally just created my own spreadsheet, and it is something that I check at the start of every month. You know, I am married now, so it is like two different incomes. We evaluate how much is coming in every month. We assign all of those dollars jobs, whether that's going towards our bills or whether that's going towards saving or investing. We just do that as a practice. And then we know when those paychecks hit, I pay myself monthly. I pay myself once at the start of the month. It's the full sum for the month. But my husband gets the biweekly paychecks. But you just know when those come in exactly where everything is going. And I even write out like paycheck one, this amount goes here, paycheck two, this amount goes here. So it's really an easy, simple system, particularly if you are partnered and you are commingling finances or sharing finances with someone else. This can also be a two-party system. It does just take a little bit of work, but it gives you maximum amount of control is how I would think about it.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that about you, Erin. So do you use it sounds like you use like a more forward looking budget as well.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Take
Yeah.
it from an
Combo of the
expert.
two.
Take it from an expert.
The
Um,
retirement account question, I do want to put a pin in until we get
yeah.
to our next section because it's
Oh
more
yeah.
relevant to that. And also, great point about people recommending that you ask questions about what are specific rules and regulations in your state. I will point out, great mention, if you have people working for you, they
Yeah.
should be providing you with W-2s so you can send them 1099s at the end of the year and you're paying them out of an appropriate business account. So all of that is part of your business specific ecosystem.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Should we continue?
Yes. Let's move on to step 3, how to set realistic financial goals, especially when income fluctuates. So, where I would like to start here actually kind of harkens back to a little bit how I think about those annual expenses, you know, Have your number, divide it by 12. That's how much you need to put away every month. I think about that strategy a lot when it comes to goal setting because sometimes, unfortunately, when we think of these great goals, these great ideas, maybe one of your goals is you want to have an emergency savings fund of $20,000. It's a big goal that you've set for yourself. But then the question is not so much, all right, that's a great goal, but now let's make it actionable. Let's think about how much money do you need to put away every single month to make that happen? How quickly do you want to achieve that goal? Anytime you set a financial goal, I want you to always pair it with a timeline. So you want an amount of money, but how fast do you want that amount of money? If we look at something like $10,000 makes it really clean and easy that if you want to have $10,000 saved, but you want that done in 4 years divided by four, now that's $2,500 a year. Now you divide that by 12, and now you have how much every single month you need to be putting away. Making sure that anytime we are setting a financial goal, we are being as actionable as possible on that goal, including being hyper specific about your why. Not just, I want to amass money for the sake of amassing money, but I want to have this money going here because also, as Uchechi mentioned earlier, it's in alignment with my values and how I want to spend and save and invest and making sure that I'm setting myself up for the future. Now, when it comes to also earning, I love to set these goals as well, thinking about how much money do I want to earn in a year and then divide that by 12. That's how much I need to be earning per month. And then that gives me a really good target about how much I need to go out and try to earn more if maybe I'm coming in a little bit under for the month. But I'm going to let Uchechi take this part that you also have to be real with yourself and about what your business can achieve. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think something I see a lot in like from entrepreneurs, right, is like people who are visionaries. Even everyone here is an artist. Like you already have this innate ability to create something, and therefore you're like, I can also create my life, right? So I'm going to go out into the marketplace and try and see that happen. But you might have a desire for what you want your life to look like financially, and actually truly not necessarily be able to meet that with the business that you have, right? And that's one of the first things I want you to be real about. Like, if I want to, I'm just going to use an easy number. If I want to make $100,000 a year, based on what I've seen in the marketplace, based on what I've been able to do, acquire, can I actually do that with this business? Sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is a little bit more complicated, right? Sometimes the question then becomes, how can I start to do that with this business, right? It's really, I think, really easy to just say like, oh, I'm an artist. People don't pay for art. But I'm like, I don't know. I live in Los Angeles and I think a lot of people pay for art. It just really, it's determined by what you do, who your market is, how you talk about it. So some things I've seen really help, and I think we can be a little bit deficient as artists, are to study business and study your business. Yes, you're an artist. Yes, you're a freelancer. Yes, you're a writer. But now that you are going out into the marketplace and asking other people to invest in your services, you're also an entrepreneur. You're also a businessman. I always think sometimes about like the Monopoly man. Like he just looks like he knows what he's doing, right? So things that I want you to think about, which are really the most important when it comes to a sale, is prospecting. How are you going out into the marketplace and asking for business? Who is it usually that actually purchases your business? And are they purchasing one at a price that really makes sense, right? Do you need to increase your prices? Would it be better to go after a different kind of prospect? What are your average sales? Like, again, I know a lot of us are artists and maybe didn't even come to this work from the perspective of I'm trying to make money, right? But if you can probably hone in a little bit more on who your target market really is, what you should really charge for, and how long it takes you on average to make a sale, you might find that that one increases your income and also reduces your stress in life, right? I know a lot of artists tend to be anti-business, so and like this might be like, oh my God, this is going way over my head. But if you literally hear anything from me, it's that you might be able to do exactly what you're doing. But where I want you to be creative about is how your business actually runs. Okay. There are tons of ways to educate yourself about business. There are free resources from universities. I also really recommend like taking classes. Like really be a student. Go to your community college. Of course, you have your library, things like that. I live in LA, so the community colleges here are literally like magnifique. They're so wonderful. There are tons of like you can go to your chamber of commerce. Usually, large cities, if you live in one, have a lot of resources for entrepreneurs, have a lot of incubators for entrepreneurs. I'm not talking about like you're building the next meta. It's like folks that are just trying to really make a living and really spending time and dedicating yourself to educating yourself on how to really be in business might be one of it's a longer term thing, right? But in terms of having maximum impact, is one of the best things you can do to really increase your income.
I also think on the point of increasing income, one of the things the two of us have talked about quite a bit offline is versions of the starting artist narrative. And there's two ways to kind of think about this. One is this idea that there's some sort of purity and sacrificing that much for your art, and that you should only be earning your living off of your art. You shouldn't sully yourself by taking any other type of work. We would like to disabuse you of this notion right here and right now. And the reason is twofold. The first kind of being there's absolutely no shame in taking 9 to 5 jobs or any sort of job, whether it's in the traditional 9 to 5 hours or, something that's more flexible for your schedule, in order to financially support yourself and provide at least a baseline of income so that you then can be creative. Because the second thing that I really want to point out is I'm sure most, if not all of us here, have experienced what it's like to either be broke or have a lot of money stress. Maybe it was an accident or an unexpected thing that came in that really blew up our budget for a period of time. Maybe it was a prolonged period of time with very low earning income, feeling very stressed about paying bills. The amount of mental bandwidth that money stress takes up is huge. And that very negatively impacts your ability to be creative and to have that space in your brain in order to even, I'm going to say, luxuriate in thought, not necessarily even an amount of time, but just in bandwidth that you have. So if what makes the most sense for your life for a period of time or for a really long time is to work a traditional job or to have something that is steady, and it doesn't have to be in an office, it could be retail, it could be serving, it could be, any sort of job that you can get that works for your life but also provides a baseline steady salary and paycheck is huge. It makes so much sense in so many ways. And one thing that I want to point out also, just Uchechi being a CFP and a poet, let's look at the confluence of that. Like those are two very different things on the surface, but also make a lot of sense. And we had a question come in prior, pre-submitted question that was, with the shuttering of media outlets, the cuts in pay and book advances, the challenge is stiffer than ever. Any suggestions? And this where my suggestion is to go outside of writing in order to earn a living at certain times. For one, there's so many stories and so much potential inspiration from broadening our worlds. And so in some cases that can be working in a job where we are interacting with all different types of people, whether it's the coworkers or the customers that come in or what have you. So also thinking about it in terms of story opportunity, idea opportunity, but taking that pressure off of your creative self by giving, your writer self can then just focus on writing, and your money earning self can focus on earning money, and kind of thinking of them as two separate individuals for a period of time. The other thing is sometimes desperation can really show. It can come out in your work. It can come out in the pitches that you're sending. It can come out even sometimes in the interviews that you're going on trying to get work. So if you, again, are able to put yourself in a position to, I've heard Elizabeth Gilbert refer to herself as like being her own patron, because she worked a day job for so long. She had 4 books out, and it wasn't until, Eat, Pray, Love came out as like her 4th book and was a huge major runaway bestseller that she finally felt confident enough to quit her day job. But a big part of that was her mentality of like, I'm going to financially support myself. I'm going to be my own patron. I don't need to have a different patron. So working that day job is the idea of being. She didn't mean that she was earning all this money from her writing self. She meant that she was earning this money elsewhere in order to support her writing self. So I do just really want us all to think about ways that we can take the pressure off of our creative self by also earning money independently of our creative selves too. And if we get to a point where our creativity is financially sustaining and supporting us for years and years and years, that's wonderful. But that's not always how it's going to pan out for all of us.
I know, that's just so true. So I hope that everyone, especially, I mean, things are the climate that we're in is like really changing, right? So just feel flexible, feel able to move like as life moves. And I'll also speak from experience. I feel like I had way more like like ability to like be like, this is my writing time, this is my work time when I worked at a 9 to 5. Like I spent so much of my time like in my business that I'm like, oh my gosh, these poems. So we're gonna start, taking some questions, but before we even get there, we just want to talk about the importance of automating your savings goals. So I would say if you are 35 and under and you're listening to this, save 10% of every dollar that you earn. Okay. And if you're 35 or older, save 15%. Like these are just really great rules of thumb that I've seen work over the span of someone's life. And so if you're ever wondering, like, how much should I be saving? Just start there. Okay. So we're gonna hop into Q&A. And Aaron, do you want to take the ones? We can start with the ones that are in the chat right now.
I have pulled some of those into our doc, just so
Oh,
you
okay.
know, too.
Perfect.
And one that was just came in the chat that I think is really important to address quickly because I did reference business credit cards. So it was, do you have an opinion about using credit cards to pay bills for A, the added layer of security between your bank account and the other party, and B, for the perks like cash back or flight miles, or C, to build credit. This is for
Hmm.
personal and business, either or. I don't want to get too in the weeds here. This is something I actually feel super strongly about. I am very pro use of credit card if you are somebody who can handle them and don't amass consumer credit debt. The reason being, a lot of things you mentioned. First, I like the extra layer of protection. When you are swiping that credit card places, they are not getting directly at your checking account. As somebody who did have my numbers skimmed from an ATM one time in a convenience store, by the way, not in an actual physical bank. If you're going to use an ATM, please go into a physical bank to use it. I used one in a convenience store because I have an internet only bank, and they're like, this is one of our special ones where you don't have to pay a fee. Just go to the bank, physical bank branch, and go to the ATM. Separate story. But when we talk about an additional layer of security, using a credit card does not link directly to your bank account. So it does provide a bit of security. Yeah, cashback, flight miles, those are all great if and only if you are paying off your credit card bill on time and in full every single month. If you have any level of debt that starts to build up, the interest rate on those bad boys can be in the high 20s, even low 30s in some really horrifying cases. And that's going to wipe out any advantage you get from that cash back or those miles. So rewards are a nice bonus if you have healthy relationship to credit and engage in healthy credit behavior. They shouldn't be the goal of using a credit card. And to build credit, keep in mind your personal and your business credit cards interact differently. So if you are somebody who does have a business account set up and you have a business credit card with your business name on it, that is not going to help build your personal credit score. Your business actually kind of has its own credit score, whole separate conversation. But if you're looking to just build your personal credit score, you need that personal credit card that's just in your name and it's not linked to your business. So pro credit card, if we're using them wisely, paying them off on time and in full every month, and not letting those rewards tempt us into overspending, because boy, that's what they are designed to do.
Yeah. Also, the fact that like there are just so many studies on how with credit cards you don't experience any pain in the way that you do when you spend a dollar. So like that pain reduction makes it just feel like a game. You're just like swiping, swiping, swiping. Therefore, drink responsibly, is what I'm hearing here. We have another question about, oh, I love this about retiring. So it seems like most writers don't retire, including bestsellers like Stephen King. However, if a writer does or need to retire, what kind of retirement accounts do you recommend? Okay, I would say maybe I want to like reframe what retirement is. For a lot of my clients to just call it the ability for work to be optional. Stephen King is work optional. He's been work optional probably for a very long time. If he manages his money, I don't know, right? He might be writing books because he don't got no money. I don't know. Probably not. So if the question is, you know, how can I make sure that at some point work is optional? What do I do? That's a really different kind of question than, oh, I want to, I want to keep writing my entire life because I love writing and because I want to keep, putting books out there. Okay. Um, if work in a if you work in a corporation, if you work at a 9 to 5 job, you're going to find that there are options like 401ks. Sometimes there are IRAs. If you are a freelancer and self-employed, you actually can work a 9 to 5 and have a different kind of retirement account in addition to the 401k. That is also just for freelancers. These ones are called SEP IRAs. It's going to be the most accessible to you. But you also might be able to get a solo 401k. That's the name of another one. It just gives you a much wider investment limit that you can do per year. It's not as easy to get your hands on without working with an advisor, but you can get your hands on a SEP IRA pretty easily. Um, and like I was saying before, in terms of your savings goals, like your savings goals, the percentage that you put away every month should be increasing as you get older. So if you're over 35, I really want you to be putting 15% or more toward that work optional fund. You could put in that SEP, you could put in an IRA, you could put in a Roth IRA. There are tons of different investment options that are out there. I would say that most importantly is doing it consistently rather than finding the perfect account, because you might get so overwhelmed by looking for the best place that you don't start. Yeah.
The thing I also love about all of that and that mentality of work optional is that, particularly if you are somebody who has never been able to fully support yourself to the lifestyle that you would like to have purely based off of your creative work, creating a retirement fund where your retirement is giving yourself the pleasure of just being able to be creative without putting the pressure of it having to earn a living. And what a wonderful version of retirement that would be for so many of us, is that we could just be creative and write and do other things as well. And hey, if we end up having a runaway bestseller in our 70s, 80s, 90s, that's cool. But it's also not there as, the pressure is not there for it having to be this major financial benefit. It's just there because we enjoy the craft of writing and want to be writers. And if you write, you're a writer.
Hmm. And what I also hear from you saying, Erin, is that that's also about framing. Like, I think sometimes when you're putting away that money for what feels like the distant future, which is literally anything over 6 months, we're like, when's that going to happen, right? It can be so hard to remain consistent with it or even feel determined about it, especially as there are fluctuations in your life. You're like, oh yeah, I was like saving consistently. I had that automated payment and then something happened and I turned it off and I never quite got back to it, right? And so sometimes it's reframing and saying, okay, the reason I'm putting this thing away is that I want this time in my life where I can write and not actually have to ask anyone any questions, right? And if that is really the goal, the value in your heart, then even as times change, it helps you kind of get back on track.
And for people who are traditionally employed and have access to a 401k, especially if it has an employer match, please
Yeah.
take advantage. But one thing you can also do, particularly if when you first are starting out and you feel like, I can't do 10 to 15%, that's way too much money. Start with 3, start with 5, start with something small. But I challenge you every 6 months to increase it by a percent, because a percent of your paycheck going into something else, you're probably really not going to feel it. You're not going to notice that a whole lot. And that amount over time slowly adds up. So if you just incrementally, tiny increments, push up how much you're putting into savings or investing, that's a way to really get to your goal without it feeling really painful.
Yeah, that's good.
On the psychology point, I liked this question. Speaking of psychology as it relates, one piece I think about is how much can I make while also having a good quality of life? I'm curious how y'all think budget as it relates to your time working. We may interpret this question differently too, which could be interesting
Yeah.
about this. But one thing, and I believe I mentioned it in the paying yourself a salary webinar, I love a doomsday budget. I have a budget, it's a really heavy name, but I have a budget that's like if I stop earning money, period, how much do I need just to essentially survive? So I created this actually a little bit before the pandemic, and then it was ready to be deployed when the bottom fell out in the early parts of the pandemic. And it's just basically a spreadsheet that's here are all of the bills that I like have to pay in order to just get by month to month. And so this is the amount of money I need every month just to survive. That also is a really good way to inform your emergency fund. So I looked at that and thought I would like to have 6x this number in emergency savings. So I always can give myself 6 months of runway because I feel like I can figure something else out in 6 months. That's a nice amount of runway. So, in terms of psychology, you can kind of go a little bit darker that way with a budget, but I don't think of budget as restriction. I think of budget as empowerment. I think of budget as this is a plan for my money. Some people have rebranded it to spending plan. It's honestly the better term. This is how I'm going to spend, save, and invest the money that I get every month. And I hope all of you can feel the same way.
That's funny. Yeah, I use a completely opposite system. And but this also shows you that a lot of this is like you create them at due to the peculiarities of your own life, like your own existence. So, mine is called a budget of love. I think it's so funny because it's the complete opposite of doomsday budget. It's that's I was really laughing to myself. So but it's built off of the some of the core things you talked about. Think of it as like a, lack of a better term, a totem pole. Okay. So at the bottom of totem pole, I have just foundational spending, and that is everything that you absolutely need to survive. It's actually your doomsday budget. Okay. Everything you absolutely need to survive. Okay. And then there are four other parts of the totem pole. And this is where I have people identify what parts of your life do you love when you're doing those things. Okay. And that might be like you're traveling. It might be that you're going to concerts. It might be that spending time with your family. It might be like eating out, right? And so once you look at then your discretionary spending for the month, you split it up across the categories of your life that you really love. The flip side of this is that sometimes, as we're looking at good, better, best, you might have low months, right? And so it helps you then be, instead of getting, depressed and then maybe you just get a lot of DoorDash or like maybe you just stay inside, right? You're still identifying what makes a valuable life. And then you start to correct and say, okay, well, I definitely would want to eat out, but instead I'm going to invite some friends over for a dinner party. Like I definitely would love to like travel with my family. And since we can't do that, we're gonna like go to the local park a lot, right? And so it's actually about like fueling your life with what love looks like, no matter the income that you have, no matter what you can spend. So that's how I think about it.
So I love ending there, just coming back to this idea of to address what we said at the beginning. It doesn't matter what your income is, it matters really your psychology, your relationship to it, and how you're taking control over it. And there are people who earn a lot and let lifestyle creep come in and they are living paycheck to paycheck. And there are people who earn modest amounts but have figured out how to maximize their lives and still create a beautiful life that is rich in many ways. So, I just really hope that everyone can take away from this to please separate your business income and your personal income first and foremost. Have that separation, but that figuring out a budgeting style that works for you just means having control over your money, which can alleviate a lot of stress in other places. And if you need to take that job in order to be your own patron, there's nothing wrong with that.
Might be a good idea. Might be even a great idea.
Well, thank you so much for being here, all of you. We really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you next time.